It was exactly 12:03 a.m. when the sky blinked. Not a cloud moved, no thunder, no rain. But every light, every bulb, every screen, every star went out. Ewan Reed stood barefoot on the front porch of the Croft Hill Observatory, his breath clouding in the late spring air. He wasn't supposed to be awake, but something had tugged him up from sleep. Not a sound, not a vibration. Something subtler like the absence of presence. He looked up, expecting to see the usual smear of constellations over the Scottish countryside. But instead, the sky looked wrong. It wasn't black. It wasn't gray. It was ... hollow. Like someone had taken the idea of sky and stretched it too far. Then he saw it. A crescent moon, except it wasn't a crescent. It was folding into itself. Not moving across the sky, but shrinking in place. And then it swallowed its own light. Total eclipse. But not just any eclipse. This one was impossible. No warnings, no charts, no observable trajectory. And worst of all, it was midnight. Eclipses don't happen at midnight, he ran inside. Instruments cold from disuse sparked reluctantly to life. Light meters, refractors, magnetic field sensors. The observatory hadn't been properly active in nearly a decade, not since the university had cut funding. But Ewan, a once promising historical astrophysicist turned quiet museum curator, had always kept it half-live like an old god, no longer worshipped but too powerful to discard. The readings were incoherent. His old photometer registered 0 lux pure darkness. But the shadows on the wall suggested a flickering light source. The magnetic compass spun slowly, even though there was no nearby metal. His grandfather's gravity, pendulum long since just a decorative relic, had begun to sway against the axis of Earth's pull. Then came the hum. Low at first, like a power station warming up under the floorboards of the world. It wasn't audible. It was visceral. You felt it in your chest, like the memory of thunder long after the sky clears. And with it came the reflections. Ewan turned to the glass cabinet behind his desk, steel-tipped sextant from 1867, a mirrored navigation scope. And the surface of the antique glass lens from the first telescope on Croft Hill, all of them, began to shimmer, not with light, with images, but not his reflection. In each surface, he saw someone else, wearing something like a pressure suit, not modern, not vintage, but slim, silver, webbed with faint lines of soft light. The figure stood still, like posing for a photograph. But it was the background that chilled Ewan's blood. It was Croft Hill, the same ridge, the same pine trees. The observatory was gone. In its place, a black tower, hexagonal, smooth, no windows. Just a single blue light blinking slowly at its base like a heartbeat. He blinked. The image disappeared. The eclipse was still holding. He looked at the time. 12:18 a.m., 15 minutes of total darkness. Impossible. Eclipses, even the longest ones, never occurred without celestial indicators, and certainly not without the sun. But then again, maybe it wasn't the moon. Maybe it was something else entirely. Ewan stepped back from the glass. His hands trembled. Outside, the night was still. ... too still. Ow. He whispered without thinking, "What are you?" The air seemed to pause. And then, for the briefest second, the reflection whispered back. But it wasn't a voice. It was a vibration. Inside his head, single word. Remember? The lights flickered back on. The eclipse was gone, but the sky hadn't changed back. It still felt hollow. And now, in the center of the antique sextants, mere one word had been etched into the silver surface. It wasn't there before. Tomorrow. And the date below it is next week. She had been walking for hours. Trees around her no longer looked like trees, but like long, waiting figures, carved out of some forgotten wood, bending slightly as if to listen. Every path looked like the last. But then, as she turned past a jagged outcrop of stone, something changed. There was a house. No, not a house. A structure. Rectangular. Rooted into the ground like it had grown there. Covered in vines that pulsed faintly red in the dim light. The windows were dark, but the glass looked like it was moving. Breathing, she hesitated, and that was when she heard it again. Not the whisper, not the ticking, but a voice. It's faint, clear, and spoken in her own voice. "You are exactly where you left me." She didn't remember saying that, but it felt like something she would have said. Once. A long time ago, to someone who never answered. The door opened before she touched it. Inside, the air was cold, but familiar. The smell of chalk dust and dried leaves. At the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it, an object wrapped in silk the color of bruised skin. She didn't want to move closer, but her body moved anyway. Unwrapping the silk, she found an hourglass. Old, ornate. The sand inside was black, and it didn't fall down but up. The name etched onto its brass frame wasn't hers. It said Ari Valen. Expired 12 minutes ago. She staggered back. But the hourglass didn't move. The black sand kept flowing in reverse. And behind her, the walls began to shift and fold like pages in a pop-up book. Scenes from her childhood, her first apartment, the alley where her brother disappeared. And each one whispered the same thing. You knew. You always knew. But you chose to forget. Her hand reached for the hourglass. She didn't know why. Maybe to stop it. Maybe to reset it. Maybe just to feel something real. But when she touched it, she was no longer alone in the room. Behind her stood a figure, shaped like a man, but too tall, too narrow, and where his face should have been was a mirror. In that mirror, she saw herself, but older and weeping. He didn't speak. But the hourglass cracked, and the walls around her began to dissolve, not collapse, not burn, but unravels. If reality itself had been held together by threads no one could see, and now they were fraying. The forest was gone, but she hadn't moved. Or the world had moved around her. Now she stood in the middle of a street, asphalt, fractured and soft underfoot, like it had been thawed after a century under ice. Buildings rose around her, warped and breathing. Yes, breathing like rib cages caught in slow motion exhale. Above, the sky wasn't black. It was written on. Lines, diagrams, not stars, but instructions. Spiraling across the clouds, bleeding formulas that no one had taught her to read but she understood. Somewhere deep in the part of her that remembered before she was born, she clutched the cracked hourglass in her hands. It was empty now, not full, not drained. Just stopped, and then she saw him again. The mirror-faced figure. He stood at the end of the street where the road bent into white haze. Not walking, not waving, just watching. And behind him, barely visible, another figure, smaller, wearing her brother's red hoodie. She ran, faster than she remembered her body could move, feet hitting the ground with no sound. Buildings glitching as she passed, shifting shapes as if rejecting her presence. But as she reached them just meters away, time stuttered. Everything around her blurred, colors smeared into noise. The mirror man turned his head, slowly, impossibly slowly, and the reflection changed. She no longer saw herself. She saw the version of her that had stayed. The girl who hadn't searched, who had locked the door, who had grown up and forgotten, and who now stood behind glass, looking at her as if she were the ghost. Then the voice returned. Not a whisper this time, command. Inside her head. Choose. Stay with him, or remember. The boy reached out for her. The mirror figure didn't move. And time began to bleed. Clock hands falling from invisible towers. Hourglasses shattering midair, words crawling backwards into her mouth. She screamed, but no sound came out. Only sand. Black sand. The same as before. And in the storm of grain and shadow and memory, one thought rose to the surface like a heartbeat that wouldn't die. You are not meant to fix this. You are meant to carry it. She reached for her brother's hand, but he was gone. So was the street, and the man, and the world. Just her. In a circle of white, alone. Holding a second hourglass, etched with a new name. Her own. And a timer. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 45 seconds. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 44 seconds. Ow. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 43 seconds. 42 seconds. That's how long she had. Not to run. Not to speak, but to remember. The circle of white wasn't light. It wasn't even a place. It was memory distilled, pressurized, weaponized, and it was collapsing. She gripped the hourglass with both hands, trying to hold it still, but the countdown didn't care. It burned its way across the brass rim, etching the numbers into her vision. She blinked and saw them behind her eyelids. 39. 38, in the silence. Voices began to speak not aloud, but from within. Her father's whisper the night he disappeared. Her mother's song sung through a locked bathroom door. Teacher's warning. You see too much. One day, you'll see something that won't let you go. The hourglass pulsed. Not ticking, not turning. Breathing. It was alive. And then came the fracture. The circle cracked, and the world opened like a wound. Beneath her feet, a spiral staircase of light. Above her head, a second sky red, shimmering, filled with shapes that watched without eyes. She began to descend, not walking, falling forward into her own past.
Oh.
She saw it all again. The day she forgot her brother's face. The moment she lied about the door being locked. The time she paused the tape, but never pressed record again. 22. She reached the bottom. There was a room, and in the room, a desk, and on the desk, a file. Her name, Valen. Same as on the first hourglass. She opened it, and inside nothing. Blank pages, but wet with ink. She touched one, and the ink moved. It's shaped into words, written in reverse. This is not your first descent. The sand is not keeping time. It's erasing it. She looked at the hourglass again. 17. 16. But the sand was no longer falling. It was climbing. Up and up, into her chest, her eyes, her breath. She couldn't scream. Not because of fear, but because she didn't know which version of her still had a voice. 13. 12. The desk vanished. The room cracked. And the mirror man returned. Only this time the mirror showed no one. No reflection, just static. And then, a third voice. Not a memory. Not her own. Clear calm. You've remembered enough. Now, choose which memory becomes real. Before her appeared two doors. One showed her as a child, safe, unbroken, with her brother beside her. The other her as she was now, alone. A custodian of time, memory, and silence. The countdown echoed. 7, 6, 5. She stepped toward the first, paused, turned, and walked through the second. Because the world didn't need another fantasy. It needed someone who remembered the cost of forgetting. The hourglass vanished, and in its place, a new one, etched with your name and a timer that begins.